I was chatting with a friend last weekend, and he was torn between splurging on a massive TV for his new home office or just sticking with his old 55-inch set that he'd been watching Netflix on for years. He kept saying, "I don't want to end up with a giant screen that looks cheap or that I can't actually use for work videos." I could see the hesitation. Dropping $2,000 on a TV that ends up being a glorified picture frame or that just doesn't play nice with his older gaming console would be a real waste. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. So I dug into the iFFALCON 75-inch class QLED 4K F75, looking at how it actually fits into a real living space, how you'd set it up, and whether the price tag matches the everyday benefits. First off, the most striking thing about this model is how thin it is. At 1.1 inches, the panel really does look like it's floating on the wall. The metal frame is minimal, which means you can mount it flush without the usual bulky bezel that makes a TV feel like a box you're bolting onto the wall. In my own apartment, I tried it on a standard TV mount that came with the package, and the whole thing sat almost flush with the drywall. The only extra step was using a spacer to get the perfect no-gap look, but that's a small price to pay for the sleek aesthetic. If you love the idea of a TV that doesn't dominate the room visually, the ultra-slim design is the real value proposition here. Now, let's talk picture quality. iFFALCON uses QLED technology paired with Dolby Vision IQ, which basically means the TV is constantly reading the ambient light in the room and adjusting its HDR performance on the fly. In practical terms, I noticed a difference when I was watching a bright nature documentary during the day versus a dark thriller in the evening. The colors stayed vibrant without looking oversaturated, and the contrast held up even when the room lights were on. Because it's a 75-inch panel, the immersion factor is impressive, but you don't get the washed-out look you sometimes see on cheaper 4K panels when the lighting isn't perfect. One of the features that surprised me is the art gallery mode. When you're not actively watching something, the TV can display high-resolution artwork or personal photos. I set it to cycle through a few of my landscape shots, and the result is a living room that feels like an actual gallery rather than a blank screen. It's a nice way to make the large screen feel less like a piece of tech and more like a decorative element, especially if you have a modern interior that values clean lines. From a connectivity standpoint, the iFFALCON doesn't leave the old-school gamers and DVD collectors behind. It includes a composite AV input, which means you can still hook up a legacy console, a VCR, or a DVD player without needing an adapter. That's something I don't see on many premium-priced TVs these days. Most manufacturers push only HDMI and ditch the older ports. For anyone who still has a classic PlayStation 2 or a collection of Blu-ray discs, that composite input is a quiet win. The smart side runs on Google TV, and Alexa is baked in. I've used the voice remote to switch from Netflix to YouTube, ask for the weather, and even dim the lights, if you have compatible smart bulbs. The interface feels familiar if you've been on Android phones, and the app library is pretty comprehensive. What I liked most is that everything is already there. Promise, you don't need a separate streaming stick, and the Google TV platform pulls in your content from multiple services in one place. It does mean you'll be tied into Google's ecosystem, which some privacy-concerned users might not love, but for most households that want a hands-free experience, it works smoothly. Now, every TV has trade-offs, and the iFFALCON is no exception. The 144 Hz refresh rate sounds impressive on paper, but you won't notice a massive difference unless you're playing fast-paced competitive games or watching high framerate sports content. The panel does a decent job handling motion, but it's not on the level of a dedicated gaming monitor with true 240 Hz. So if you're a serious esports enthusiast who needs the absolute lowest input lag, you might want to look at a TV that markets itself specifically for gaming performance. Another practical consideration is the size. A 75-inch screen is a statement piece, and you need enough viewing distance to make it comfortable. The general rule of thumb is to sit about 1.5 to 2.5 times the diagonal distance away for a 75-inch, that's roughly 9 to 15 feet. If your living room is on the smaller side, you could end up craning your neck or feeling overwhelmed by the sheer scale. In that scenario, a 65-inch model could give you most of the same visual punch without the spatial constraints. One hidden cost that isn't on the spec.